you ever go to like an estate auction and find yourself bidding on a big old box that's really heavy and was labeled gold coins? Nope, I never did that either. But I did buy this engine. Hey, this is Walt's Lightnings. I've got this engine and it's a real mystery. And we're going to try and decode the mystery today. I went to buy it. There's a story behind it. This guy's got it for sale. He says, I have an 04 Lightning engine. Took it out of an 04 pickup with 80,000 miles on it. So I said, okay. So I go over to look at it. It's not too far here in southern Nevada, about 20 minutes from my house. So whenever you see a Lightning motor close to home, you got to go look. So I'll go over and look. And, you know, definitely Lightning motor, but it's got some odd things about it. On the front here, on front of the supercharger, it says Eaton. In most of the 01 to 04 motors, they say SVT, and they got the Ford Oval on them. But not this one, it says Eaton. So then I look around and they agree to pull a spark plug. We pull a spark plug out. It's only 4 turns to get the spark plug out. So it doesn't have 8 thread heads. If it doesn't have 8 thread heads, it's not an 04. The question is, what year is it? So we got to looking around on it. Definitely it's an 01 to 04 engine. Got the right part number on the intake manifold, so it's not a 99 to 2000. And their story is they took it out of this 04 pickup truck to put in a Johnny Lightning motor. But it's odd. It has all the front accessories are still on the motor. I mean, the air conditioning compressor's there, all the idlers, the power steering pump, even the power steering pump reservoirs on the motor. Alternator. What's missing is the throttle body, which is kind of weird. And all the vacuum lines and the electrical harness, they're all missing. So it's kind of strange, but don't know what people tell you. So we got to investigate. So while I was there looking at it, I discovered on the back of this cam cover, there's a date that's February of 01. So at least this cam cover is from 01 motor. But beyond that, we're going to have to figure it out as we go. And the condition's kind of the same way. We're going to have to figure out what condition the motor's actually in. And what the plan is I'm going to pull the injectors off, get them out of the way so I can pull the spark plugs. See what we find when we pull the spark plugs. And after we do that, we're going to pull the supercharger off so we can see what condition the supercharger's in. We can see the coating on the rotors, that'll tell us. And we can see the intercooler, and we can see how much dirt and oil's on the intercooler. That'll tell you miles on the motor too. So little by little, we're going to decipher this thing as we go and figure out as much as we can as we go. We pull the intake manifold at some point, and I'm going to pull the exhaust manifolds and the accessories off of it. And then I'm going to run a leak down. I'm going to see what condition each cylinder is actually in. So that's where we're headed. And we're going to get started by pulling off the fuel injectors. Okay, we pulled the 4 8mm bolts that hold the injector rails down to the intake manifold. Now I'm going to pull the injectors off and hopefully get them off intact without tearing anything up. That worked. This side. Okay, off they come. Now I just got to fish them out of here a little bit. Get this around that corner, one way or another. There we go. Okay, injectors are off. They obviously been steam cleaned because there's paint on the inside towards the center, and there's no paint on the outside. They've been blasted all the paint off of them. Things that happen, I guess. Put these aside. Stop it there. Okay, so you can see I pulled the fuel rail off, and I pulled the spark plugs out. And we'll start over here with number 1. And it's a Motorcraft plug, and the gap is a little big, probably top end of the range. And It's not a new plug, but it's okay. And number 2, also Motorcraft, pretty nice. Number 3, Motorcraft, gap's bigger, so they're not all gapped the same, and it's not like they burn the same, it's just like they weren't gapped the same to start out with. Number 4 is interesting, because number 4 plug's not a Motorcraft. Number 4 plug is an NGK, and it's a TR6. And it obviously looks pretty old. It's been in there for quite a while. When the truck is together, the engine's in the truck, the hardest spark plug to get to is on the passenger side and the back. It's under everything. All the heater hoses are here, and a lot of confusion back here, wiring. So somebody didn't decide to change that plug. They just said, well, that must be good. I'll just leave that in there. But here's the story. This is not an original plug, and it's been in this engine for a long time. So this engine has obviously had several plug changes. And the gap on this plug is about 22 thousandths. You look at it, it don't look like it's very good shape, but why such a small gap? Interesting. And why didn't somebody spend some time to change it? Now on the other side, number 5 through number 8, they're all Motorcraft. They're all about the same wear and condition, burning wise. Number 6 has got a giant gap. It's about 56 thousandths. The other ones, okay. But if you look at the electrode wear, they're all about the same. So that plug was just gapped really too big. I mean, just look, you can see the comparison between these two. You can see how big that gap is. The rest of them are pretty much within the upper end of spec, which means they were probably all right at some point. But there's no disaster. There's no obvious problem other than this one's white and it's got a small gap. So some strange stuff there. So the next thing we're going to do, I think, is take some of the accessory belts loose so we can take the supercharger off. That'll be our next step. Okay, so as you can see, we got out some big old 25mm wrenches, and we were able to get the EGR tube off the EGR valve and off the exhaust manifold. That gets that out of our way so we can get this supercharger off. And we've cracked loose all the bolts so they're not super tight. Now I'm going to take them off, but first thing I got to do is get this water pipe off for the intercooler. And that's a couple of 13mm nuts. These on. Okay. Okay, then I can take the water pipes here in the back loose from the intercooler. I've loosened the clamps already. Put them off, like that. Then we got the water tubes. Yeah, they're pretty corroded inside. Not a good sign. Okay. Now I proceed to get all the bolts out of the intake manifold. Get the blower off. A little tight that guy is. This guy's going to be tight too. Okay. If you've ever done this, these are pretty long studs. They go all the way down to the bottom of the intake manifold. So this takes a while to unscrew them all. Get these bolts loose. We loosened the tensioner and took the belt off the supercharger. Pretty long. Comes out. That one comes out. One more on this side. here. Okay, now we have one more. Takes a swivel. When we get this blower off, it's going to tell us two things. We can look at the blower itself, look at the wear on the coating of the rotors, and that'll tell us how many times it's been around. All the pulleys were stock, so I don't think it was ever overdriven, but we'll see here. Going to see how heavy this thing is, heavily attached or not. No, it's easy. Okay, so I'm going to take this off, put it on the bench, and then we're going to examine what we got here. Okay, so as you can see, we pulled the supercharger off, and you can look down inside here to the intercooler, and you can see nearly half the intercooler is covered, plugged with this stuff. And interesting pieces. And this is obviously some of the material that would normally be on the rotors of the supercharger. So it's flaked off and it's been blown down here, and along with some oil vapor, it's plugging up this intercooler. But you can see it's crusty. It's coming right off this. I mean, this intercooler, we can clean it. But what's interesting is that I don't think the coating that's on here obviously came off a supercharger. I don't think it came off that supercharger, because we're going to show you that in a minute. Okay, so now we look at this supercharger, and remember this is an Eaton supercharger, and if you look at the rotors of this, you can see that the coating is still on the rotors. Now, there's a couple places where you can see there's been something chip away at the coating right there, like that. But the coating is still on the rotors. And the bearings are nice and tight. Everything seems good on this. And then I'm thinking, well, I must have changed the supercharger. This one hasn't clearly got as many miles as the one that's on there. So that's what I'm thinking. I think the supercharger that was on there went south. It lost all its coating. It plugged up the intercooler. Probably didn't run very good with that much plugged up. They put this on wherever they got it, and it's not nearly as high miles as the rest of this motor that I've seen so far. This is clean this up and be good. Okay, so now you can see we loosened the tensioner on the accessory drive belt, and we took the alternator off, because that's kind of in the way to pulling off what we're going to get off next. We're probably going to go back and take off the accessories here in a minute, but before I do, I want to pull the intercooler, the garbage can of an engine cooler. Wow, it's really plugged. So once you get off the bolts that are out of the supercharger, which go all the way to the lower intake, the only bolts that hold the intercooler on are these four right here. So I already broke them loose because they were tight. So we'll just get these going. Yeah. Yeah. take these 4 out. And this intercooler definitely needs to get soaked into something to get all that stuff out of there. I think a lot of it I can just scrape out to the trash can. But in my mind, that kind of solves one mystery. The supercharger that was on here turned enough miles to lose its coating, dumped it all in here, and then somebody just put on another supercharger, probably used off another engine. Why they didn't clean up that mess, I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me. But these engines don't talk. You have to look real hard to get their secrets. Okay, now, goes over there. You ever watch that I Do Cars guy? He's got big blue. I got even bigger green because lightning's needed. There you go. Broke her loose. Thank you, Mr. Green. Always a pleasure. Now we can take this off. And there's very little oil in the bottom. That's good. I'll show you that in a minute. I'm going to get rid of all this stuff that's in here, but that's cleanable. That'll clean up. Now you can look down in here and you can see oil collects in here during normal operations from your PCV. It gets sucked in here. And the way it gets out is when you go to boost, there's a fitting in the back. It's actually a drain right in the bottom. When you go into boost, it'll blow that pressure, will blow the oil through this fitting in the back into the T that goes to the PCV. This is actually a two-way PCV valve. Under boost, it'll blow that way. Under vacuum, it sucks this way. If you put the wrong valve in here, which this looks like it's the wrong one, then the oil under boost can't get out. But there's not much oil in there, so that's pretty good. And I'll get that sucker out of there later. I tried. It's pretty tight. There you go. Out. But it's clearly not the right one. It's an aftermarket piece. I can look it up. But if it doesn't let it blow through there, you collect a lot of oil. So next step is we're going to pull the intake manifold, which is a whole bunch of 10 millimeters. So that will be our next step. We'll be doing that now. Good. Okay, we're about ready to pull the intake manifold. We got all the bolts out of it. One thing I wanted to note to you is that all the pulleys on the front, all the idlers and the tensioners are Ford parts. Kind of either they're wonderful, they've lasted the life of the engine and beyond, or somebody put Ford parts on it when they changed them. But they're definitely Ford parts. It's a clue of some sort, I'm sure. So in order to get the intake manifold off, we're going to enlist Big Green here again. So I know that guy in Jersey's jealous because he's only got a blue, but get in here somewhere. I can pry. And pry this guy. Maybe in the back's better, huh? Oh, lots of them back here. Yeah. Okay, I think we're good there. I could have used a lesser tool, but I like that too. So we still got one here, I guess. Does that go through? Oh, I didn't think it did. Something's still through. Let me get that out of there. Yep. Oh yeah, it's a long one. And it's covered with oil. It's good if you like threads. Ah, that's why it's covered in oil. It's really rusty. Interesting. Okay, but now the intake should come off. And we can look at what's in the valley. No longer a handle. Okay. Interesting. what you see here, usually, everything from rat's nest to bird's nest or mud or whatever. Not too much. Yeah. Still got the knock sensor in it. Isn't the heater tube still on there? So, interesting. These look all the world to be Ford gaskets. They look okay. All right, so I think next step we're going to do is we're going to pull the cam covers, take a look at how much gunk is in the valve train. Because if I look down the cylinders, maybe I should do that for you. We'll see if we can get the camera down here. Hold on. Okay. I'm gonna look down the intake ports, looking for trouble. And first thing I see is they all look pretty good. No deposits on the valve guides. Nothing big on the valves. Everything looks clean in there, actually. Even that cylinder back there where I don't think they change the spark plug very often. Same on this side. Side to side looks very similar. Don't really see any deposits on the valves or the stems. That's good. That means that it's been burning good, probably using good gas. And it might actually indicate lower miles than we expect. Okay, so as you can see, we've pulled the cam covers off. Take a look. And while it's not beautiful, it's not terrible either. All the rockers are in place. All the springs look good. All the cam lobes actually look good. You can see they've been rubbing, but they're not wearing. There's not really any deposits to speak of. So probably had oil changes. The chain is actually nice and clean. Cam gears are nice and clean. Overall, from the other engines I've taken apart, I would say probably 100K on this motor with good service. And you can see it's got the early type cam gears on it. So that means it's probably an 01 or 02 motor. And we do have a block build date. I don't have my decoder ring with me, but it's a 9L22 block cast date. That's when the block was cast. So we'll be able to figure that out. But if you look, I don't see any signs of head gasket leaking or anything funny. All looks good on this side. And like we said, all the valves, intake valves, all look good. Water passages are okay. Tomorrow, we will hook it up to my leak down tester and we'll do a leak down on all the cylinders and see what we're coming up with. But right now, if I'm guessing, I'd say 01, 02 motor with about 100,000 miles on it. That's kind of where I'm coming out.